I don't think I've seen it yet. That's on. Yeah, that's fine.
Hello everyone. Good afternoon. It's the afternoon here in London. We'll just give everyone a couple of minutes to join.
So we can't see people, can we not? Is that the way it's set up? Or?
Yeah, I can't see anyone either.
I don't know if it's only just panelists we can see, let's see. No, I can't see anyone other than.
Yeah, I think it is just the panelists we can see. Yeah, I think the way this one's set up, I think you can't see the attendees.
Perfect. We'll just give everyone another minute. I'll share my screen in the meantime. Josie, just let me know if you can see my screen.
Yep.
Yep. Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, we'll just give everyone till 4:15 and then I'll kick off. Okay, great. So I'll make a start then. So welcome. Thank you for joining us today on what should be a very interesting and informative session. I will kick off the session and give a brief introduction on SCI and our portfolio of journals. So, the Society of Chemical Industry was established in 1881 as a transdisciplinary innovation hub. So our purpose is to accelerate science out of the lab and into the industry for the benefit of society. At the heart of everything that we do is our community, where we effectively convene academia, industry, government, and our innovation partners. And our focus is to address societal challenges across climate, planet, health, and well-being. So SCI today currently comprises of more than 900 companies of international organizations with a global network, more than 500 universities, more than 60,000 people in the network, and more than 600 early career researchers. We have our publications, which are 9 peer-reviewed journals, and our chemistry and industry magazine. We run many successful events across agri-food, environment, materials, energy, health, and well-being, where we showcase innovation into the industry. So, publishing with SCI. So SCI launched its first journal titled The Society of Chemical Industry in 1881. And since then, the Society has established 9 additional peer-to-peer journals, becoming a global leader in journals focusing on translating chemistry and related sciences into industry for the benefit of society. Journals in our portfolio span across energy, life sciences, and consumer products. And last year, the Society launched its 9th journal, which is also the first journal from the new series of open access journals. The next video explains our concept and strategy for the series of journals.
SCI Innovate Open, a groundbreaking series of industry-integrated gold open access journals launched by SCI, fostering innovation and accelerating the commercialization of scientific discoveries, where academic rigor meets industrial relevance and transdisciplinary teams collaborate and tackle global challenges, implementing innovation from the lab to industry, embracing open science principles to ensure that new discoveries are accessible to all, inviting a global dialogue on the critical challenges facing the world. Industry experts take real-world challenges and transform discoveries into practical solutions. These journals are where science meets business. The first gold open access release will be SCI Sustainability. This journal covers a wide range of topics, from technological advancements to policy frameworks, all with the goal of fostering a more resilient and environmentally conscious scientific industry. Future releases will share groundbreaking research across the topics of climate, sustainability, health and well-being. As a global network, we are looking for researchers, industrialists, policymakers and entrepreneurs. Join a global community and drive real-world solutions.
So, SCI Sustainability, it's now open for submissions and we welcome your contributions. So this journal is essentially a globally leading and action-oriented initiative dedicated to driving sustainable development across industries. Its foundation is firmly rooted in science and innovation and will serve as a catalyst for transformative change. Our scope and aims is what really sets us apart from some of the other sustainability journals out there. We welcome submissions in the thematic areas of policy and economics, sustainable technologies, manufacturing and supply chains, and standards and measurements. So along with the other launches in the Innovate Open portfolio, we're providing a platform for cross-disciplinary research and collaboration. So we're not focusing on specific disciplines of science. Rather, SCI Sustainability aims to break down silos, foster and co-create innovative solutions that address complex sustainability challenges in the scientific industries. What is quite special about our journal is our expert senior editorial board of honorary editor-in-chief and our editors-in-chief. So we have Professor Anthony Ryan, who is our honorary editor-in-chief. He's a founding director of the Grantham Institute and has worked with industry throughout his career. His research mainly focuses on circularity of plastics. Then we have our editor-in-chief, Professor Luc van der Wielen, who is a biotechnology and chemical engineer, director of the Bernal Institute at the University of Limerick in Ireland, and distinguished professor in bio-based economy. He's worked with industry for most of his career and involved in various governmental initiatives across Europe. And last but not least, we have Professor Nazia Habib, who is a social scientist and political economist, founder, head, and professor of Centre for Resilience and Sustainable Development and the Department of Land Economy at the University of Cambridge. So she actively works with governments globally to identify solutions to global issues such as sustainability. She represents governments and actively speaks at events such as COP and World Economic Forum. So our diverse expert senior board have a wealth of transdisciplinary expertise and global networks who will oversee the editorial strategy and amplify authors' publications. And lastly, as mentioned before, this is an industry integrated journal. So the journal's industry advisory board is comprised of senior sustainability executives from these companies, and they represent a diverse scientific sectors and will provide invaluable guidance to the editorial board. This ensures that the journal's coverage of innovations are grounded in real-world challenges faced by the industry, thus facilitating large-scale and lasting change. So the author journey does not just stop at publication. Post-publication, we aim to put authors in touch with our diverse community of industry, academia, entrepreneurs, and policymakers to ensure that your research is making real-world impact. So we are the largest R&D focused community with over 30 billion invested in R&D globally. We were built by industry for industry. Our community has a unique breadth and depth, being interdisciplinary and consisting of large and small companies. We are independent, focused in societal benefit and grounded in the science. So we have that global reach. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you consider SCI journals for your next publications. I will take questions at the end of the session, but for now, I'd like to introduce you to Jackie, who is a patron of the College of Scholars.
Thank you, Nageen, and really exciting with the launch of the new Sustainability Journal. I think the timing is really excellent for that. So I'm only going to say a few words by way of introduction, really to Steve, who's going to lead through quite a portion of today. But just before that, I mean, Nageen, am I okay to, and sorry, Josie, it's not a slide, but I was just going to go on to the SCI website for a second, if that's all right. But yes, so I know we can't see all of you, but it looks like we've more than 35 folks or so on the line. I hope you can see and hear us well. So my name's Jackie Sheridan. I am head of research biology at Syngenta. So I lead an organization of around 240 scientists split across the UK and Switzerland mainly, and working in a global network. I'm a biologist by training, not a chemist. And we work in the very exciting and challenging and never dull world of trying to find new ways to help farmers and growers protect crops. And that's against biotic pests, but also in the climate challenges, etc. So a really interesting role. I sit on the board of trustees of the SCI, and Syngenta have had, and still does have, a very active and great partnership and relationship with SCI across many aspects. But very, very recently, I became a patron of the College of Scholars. So I just wanted, for those who, I understand many of you on this session are part of that community of College of Scholars, but some of you are early career scientists and members of SCI, but maybe not particularly part of the college. So I am not going to go through the website, but SCI have a really, if you haven't been to the website, I strongly recommend you take a few minutes to go to this website. It's just full of very, very interesting and useful information. And just to give you the purpose of what the College of Scholars is around, to develop and support a community of current and former scholars within SCI's network. And scholars are current and past recipients of studentships or scholarships or travel bursaries and a number of other awards. However, you can join the College of Scholars through other mechanisms by becoming an ambassador or a mentee. So I really, really encourage you to take a look at the website, reach out to the membership team, Josie, Nageen, others, always really happy to help, and strongly encourage you. There's a great range of events and opportunities that you can get involved in for now, but also for building your future network and future career. So this is just the purpose. And as a patron, I'm now a member of quite a reasonable sized patron group. 50% of us, I would say, are from industry settings and a diverse range of industries. And Nageen showed some of the companies that may be involved, but also lots of academics, multidisciplinary, really key academics. And I feel we've got a great responsibility and accountability to ensure we really support that College of Scholars network for maximum impact for the events, help set the strategic direction, connect with you collectively, but also individually. Give you some exposure to what we do, and if that's something that interests you, and just really, yeah, build some partnerships and mutual learning. So I had the chance to come today, and I'm now going to stop talking about me and the College of Scholars and give an intro to Steve, which I think this is what I'd say. It could be a much longer biography, but you have got Steve today, and he's extremely experienced. So Steve Duke received his PhD in botany and biochemistry from Duke University in the US in 1975. He was a USDA Agricultural Research Service scientist for 44 years and is now a principal scientist at the University of Mississippi School of Pharmacy. He has authored over 500 journal and book chapter publications on a wide variety of topics, mostly related to pest management. And I think, Steve, your Web of Science and Google Scholar H indices are 75 and 108 respectively. And Scholar GPS ranks him the #1 scientist in pest control worldwide based on his publications. Pause for a sec, just that's huge. Steve's been especially active in discovery of modes of action of natural product-based phytotoxins that might be and will be hopefully the basis of future herbicides. And I know Steve's had a long connection with many people in the sort of herbicide space. He's a fellow of the American Chemical Society, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and the Weed Science Society of America. I think, Steve, you've been chair of the agrochemical division of ACS and president of the WSSA, the International Weed Science Society, and the International Allelopathy Society. So his awards include an honorary doctorate from the University of the Basque Country in Bilbao, Spain, election to the USDA ARS Hall of Fame, and the 2022 Sterling B. Hendricks Memorial Lecturer Award. So Steve has served on editorial boards of several scientific journals, including 12 years as editor-in-chief of the Society of Chemical Industry journal, Pest Management Science, absolute Bible for us, for which SCI have awarded him their publishing medal in 2024. So I could go on, but I think you're in excellent hands today to tap the knowledge and wisdom of Steve and really get his advice and steers. And on a personal note, from many colleagues at Syngenta, we've had long-term engagements and relationships and productive and fruitful discussions with Steve on many topics. He's given several insightful presentations to us at our company and at our R&D site in the UK, which is quite close to London for those who maybe don't know. The last two presentations was a version of the one you'll get today, but really geared towards industry. We have a role to play in publishing too, a really important role. And also at the heart of what we're trying to do is finding new herbicides and new target sites, and Steve has brought his wisdom and will continue to on that. So I stop, sorry for the lengthy intro. Steve, I think I'm handing the floor to you, and I wish you all a very productive and yeah, useful event and asking questions and stuff. Let me stop sharing.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for the kind introduction. And it's a pleasure to be here today. I apologize in advance for any throat clearing or coughing. I caught something while traveling last week. I'll try to keep that to a minimum. Can I be heard? Yeah, okay. If we could just have the first slide, Nageen. Okay. And the next one. Jacqueline gave a bit of background that covers all this, so I'll skip this. I do have a lot of experience publishing as an author, editor, journal advisor, and as a reviewer of all kinds of publications. Next. And I'm going to talk about types of publications, quality of publications, how you measure that, benefits of publications to you, your organization, and to science in general, advice for writing publications and pitfalls in publishing, reviews and reviewing, and trends in scientific publishing, and a tiny bit on publication ethics. Next. Fundamentally, there are two types of scientific publications. If you exclude patents, that's a whole nother topic, but journals and books, and there are all kinds of journals: open access, mixed access, specialized or general, affiliated with scientific societies or only with a publisher, and low to high impact factors. If you're published, let's say you publish on lichens, and not many people publish on lichens, but there are journals that specialize in such things. So if you want to focus the attention of what you're publishing on what the area that you're in, you can go for a very specialized journal, but many fewer people will see it. Or you can go to a more general journal. So this is a decision that you have to make. Generally, the specialized journals have lower impact factors than the more general journals. One of several things you have to consider when you decide what a journal to publish in. Journals can be associated with scientific societies like American Chemical Societies or SCI. There are reasons why you might want to submit a paper to such a journal, or to a journal that's published only by a publishing house. And then, of course, impact factor, which I'll get into in more detail, can have a huge impact on what journal you submit your paper to. Books, there are essentially two types of hardbound publications. One is series, like reviews of environmental contamination and toxicology. Until recently, that was a series of hardbound books. getting up to about 300 volumes as the most recent. And one problem with submitting your papers to books is they very often are not indexed by the most important companies that compute your H index. So keep that in mind if you're submitting to a book. And then standalone books, very attractive, but there's some problems with that. Next slide. Types of papers, if you're submitting to a journal. Most papers submitted are research papers, and then there's front matter, which consists of perspectives, opinion pieces, editorials, reviews, regular reviews, or mini reviews. And so all kinds of things can be submitted to journals that publish research papers other than research papers. So consider publishing front matter too, and I'll talk about that in more detail. Next. Consider publishing reviews and perspectives if you consider yourself an authority. If you'd like to be considered an authority, you can publish a review. Some people will assume you're an authority if you've got a review published. It can help your reputation and status in the scientific community, and they're generally cited more than research papers on the whole. If you want to do it, contact the journal before you submit it and explain your rationale and outline before submitting, and make sure you adhere to the instructions of the journal when you do that. Some journals have very elaborate procedures for acceptance of even considering a review paper, and others not so much. Reviews should be critical. Some topics, if you covered everything in the literature, you would be citing tens of thousands of papers. So you have to separate the wheat from the chaff. And encyclopedic reviews don't show much scholarship. If you're a real authority, you can give your opinion and leave out the papers that really don't contribute much to the topic. And then lastly, nothing kills the interest of a reader by looking at 20 pages with no tables or figures to break up the text. Put in meaningful figures and tables. Get permission from where you're taking the figures if you're reproducing them before you publish them in your review. But most people are very gratified to see their figures being reused in a review, depending on what you say about their work. But if you're really not considered as in the forefront as being an authority, you can go for a lower impact journal, and they might be interested in you writing a review. And mind you, a person who's not doesn't have a long reputation in an area may have a point of view that might be quite valuable in the literature. So I encourage you to consider review after you've established yourself in an area. Next. Quality of publication type. For journals, that's pretty easy. The impact factor of a journal generally tells you that it's what its quality is. The higher the impact factor, the higher quality the journal is considered to be. For books, it's hard to know. They are not rated. So another reason to think hard before you submit a review to a book, or certainly a book would be a very unusual place to put unpublished data, although some people do it. Next. Yeah, books look very nice on the shelf, but they're generally less available, less cited, slower to become available. I submitted a review which I thought was of great interest to a book about 4 years ago, and it still hasn't been published. So you may end up waiting a long time before you see your paper in print. And textbooks may be an exception. They don't really fit the rules for other books. Next. So I mentioned impact factor. It's a very simple calculation. It's citations of papers from the last 2 years divided by the number of citable papers of the last 2 years. That gives you the impact factor. And Clarivate Analytics generates the impact factor once a year, and people are waiting with bated breath to see what the impact factor of their journal's going to be for the past year. And Clarivate also publishes Web of Science. So a very important consideration of many authors to determine where they're going to publish. Next. This is an example, Pest Management Science. We worked hard to get our impact factor up, and it's a fairly specialized journal. These are the data for several years in the past, and we did a survey of authors whose papers had been accepted, and the impact factor next was rated as one of the more important considerations of authors in submitting papers to our journal. In the area of pest management, we had one of the highest impact factors, so that helped get some of the better papers submitted to our journal. Next. As I mentioned, review papers are generally cited more, on average 2.4 times greater than citations of research articles. If you want to increase your H index, which I'll discuss later, publish a lot of reviews. Next. And open access papers are cited more than papers that are not open access. The more access to other people publishing, the more you're going to be cited. Next. Of course, there are a lot of benefits to scientific publications to you as a scientist. They enhance your reputation among your peers, enhance your job possibilities. When I'm trying to hire somebody as a postdoc, or in the past as a staff scientist, their publications were probably the most important things that I looked at. If they don't publish, it's going to be hard to evaluate them. It enhances your interaction with scientists outside the workplace. Other people see your work, contact you, discuss it, give you ideas, etc. And it enhances your position within your organization. In universities, tenure and promotion is dependent to a large extent on the number and quality of your publications. A mentor of mine many years ago said publications are the currency of science. They come in all denominations. So think of that when you publish. The higher the impact factor, the higher the denomination, and the more cited your publication is, the higher the denomination. Next. Beware of predatory journals. I've cited a paper here that was published in Nature not too long ago that discussed the whole area of predatory journals. And I think most of you know what they are. These are these very aggressive journals that generally don't have a very high impact factor, that are trying very hard to sending you all kinds of emails, very often journals that have nothing to do with your expertise, guaranteeing that your paper will be reviewed in 10 days to 2 weeks, which is dubious. If you're asking really bona fide reviewers to review it, they generally don't take more than 10 days to 2 weeks, etc. There are journals that are clearly predatory. There are journals that are clearly not predatory, and there's a gray zone in between. There are some journals that start out as predatory journals and over time are considered legitimate journals, and the opposite occurs too. There are journals that start out as legitimate journals and slide into being predatory journals. There are several websites. Cabell's website discusses and lists some that are considered predatory. There's also a directory of open access journals that will discuss that. Beall's listing of predatory journals is no longer on the web simply because his university was afraid of lawsuits from publishers that were being called predatory. So it's a very complex issue, but be cognizant of the fact that you don't want to publish in a predatory journal. And a main reason, a clear reason you don't want to publish in a predatory journal is the indexing companies that index your publications will sometimes throw out all of the papers in what they consider a predatory journals, so it does not contribute to your H index. Next. And let's talk about H index, something that's created a monster in academia and everywhere else, but it's a very interesting metric of the quality or impact of your publications. And it's based on how often your how many times your paper has been cited by other papers. It's called the H index because a physicist in San Francisco named Hirsch devised this metric. There are other metrics like the I-10 of Google Scholar, et cetera, that have tried to be a little more meaningful than the H index, but I think the H index is what is still generally used by academia and also by other organizations trying to quantify or get some handle on the impact of your research. It's a very simple metric. If you plot your highest cited paper as number one and then work your way down to your least cited paper, the number that equals the number of citations where the number of the paper and the number of citations equal each other, that is your H index. And so a very simple metric, but meaningful. If you're not cited, can your work really have that much impact? Now, mind you, there are some areas of research, let's say you work on photosynthesis where there are an enormous number of people working on photosynthesis, you're going to get cited more if your work is any good at all. If you're a lichenologist, there aren't many people working on lichens. It's going to be very difficult to have a very big H index. So in judging people's, as scientists, their H index is interesting and useful, but think of the context of how many people work in their area of science. They may be the top cited lichenologist in the world, but still not have a really great H index. Next. There are a lot of organizations that generate H indexes. Google Scholar is the one that a lot of people use. They're more promiscuous. If you're cited on a website, a preprint, a book chapter, anything at all, Google Scholar counts it. Clarivate, the people that do Web of Science, that's the gold standard for H indexes. They don't count book citations. They don't count many of the things that Google Scholar does count. And if they consider a publication a predatory journal, it's not counted in assessing your H index. Next. This is an example of Google Scholar. If you look yourself up, you'll get a printout like that. Your most cited paper working its way down. And then there'll be a histogram there showing how many citations per year, your H index, your I-10 index, your total number of citations. For recency, they look at the score would be if you started in 2020, let's say you stopped publishing 10 years ago, that since 2020 would be pretty low. So that tells people how recent your research is. Next. And if you click on a particular paper, it'll show you the number of public citations per year, and then list every single paper that they've used to calculate your H index, and it'll show you can click on those papers and get to those papers. So it's very handy for looking at who's citing you and why they're citing you. Next. So benefits of scientific publications to your organization. This is something that I went into more detail in when I was visiting Syngenta 2.5 years ago. It publicizes the work that you're doing, which makes the work that the company is doing more transparent to the public and gives more people more confidence in what they're doing. And journals are doing a better job of enhancing alt metrics, which in a way is publicity of higher profile papers. So it gives the work that the company is doing a little free publicity done by the journal. It also enhances outside interactions. Scientists from outside the company see the publication, contact the authors, discuss things, provide new ideas, and enhances the standing of your organization when seeking funding. If you're not a company, but if you're a startup company, this could be very, very useful if you're a startup company looking for outside funding. Anyway, next. Benefits to science. A lot of this is totally obvious. It documents what you've done. And I've told many scientists, if you don't publish your work, you might as well not have done it, because nobody knows. Nobody will ever know. And that prevents, even if it's so what type research, you can publish it in a lower impact journal, and that will prevent others from reinventing the wheel, even if your findings are not of great interest. And documenting findings can be useful or critical for progress in science, in that even things that may not be very interesting now, they may not have a lot of impact now, could have impact down the line when people learn new things that interact with what you did that you didn't think was that important. Next. Publish it if it's competently done. Writing publications. I see a lot of scientists say they have writer's block, like the guy in The Shining. I don't think I've seen a scientist use a fire axe to go through a door because of writer's block, but we shouldn't have writer's block. We don't have to come up with a plot or characters. The data's there, the literature's there that we're going to cite. Sit down and write a rough draft. The rough draft is the hardest part. After you've written the rough draft, you can use your co-authors to polish and refine it and add to it. Get that first draft done and then keep improving it. Next. And for God's sake, write in simple, clear sentences. Write like Ernest Hemingway or Kurt Vonnegut, not like William Faulkner or Dostoevsky. Lower the Gunning Fog Index. Gunning's a guy that came with a metric for measuring how obtuse your writing is. Make your message clear. Make what's the most important objective clear to the reader, and tell the reader why the findings are significant and important. But avoid hyperbole. It's very irritating to editors and reviewers to say that this is the best thing that's been done in the last 50 years when it's clearly not. Use supplemental materials. Since electronic publishing, this allows readers to get to a lot of data that's too voluminous to put in the paper, but can be put online as non-essential data to the main story. So use that to get to make that material accessible to people, but don't clutter up the paper with it. And make sure your citations back up what you use them for. Nothing is more irritating to a reviewer to see a paper cited and you go to the paper and say, I didn't realize that paper said that. And you go and look at the paper and it didn't say that. Poor scholarship is really irritating to reviewers. Next. Titles. Titles are very important. They should be clear and informative, unless you're trying to hide something. Don't use acronyms, jargon, abbreviations, and codes in titles. You want as many people as possible to understand what the paper is about. If you're writing the title just for a small group of people that work in your area, you've missed the boat. Eye-catching titles are sometimes beneficial, but be careful with cute titles. They can put off editors or reviewers. Next. Reviewing and editing. Reviewing other people's papers will make you a better writer, especially if they're poorly written, because you think about how could they have said this better. Giving people advice on improving their paper will make you a better writer. And if you expect other people to edit and review your papers, you should feel obligated to review papers that you are qualified to review, provided you have time. So please try to review as many papers as you can that you're qualified to review. Next. Welcome rigorous reviews of your paper. Valid criticisms will improve the paper. And you can look at rigorous reviews and editor comments as time and expertise of unpaid consultants to improve your paper. They're valuable. And nothing irritates me more than to spend a lot of time reviewing a paper. The paper gets rejected and I get the same paper back from the same authors from another journal, and they haven't taken they haven't done a thing to improve the paper. Reviewers and editors are like football referees, UK football. They don't get all the calls right, but do not attack the referee. Just if rejected, move on to another journal. Don't let it gather dust. Unless there's clearly something that is very, very wrong that's been done, and then go to the editor and say, this is clearly wrong here. But even then, I generally just go to another journal. Sometimes I let the first journal know that I think they made a mistake, but don't carp about it. Next. Here are some reasons for rejection without review of the journal that I was editor-in-chief of for 12 years. And these are just some of the reasons. And a lot of journals are going to rejection without reviews to avoid reviewer burnout. People are being asked to review 10 or 12 times a week, and they just can't review that many papers. Not well. If the paper is insufficient scientific significance to the journal or a so what paper, that's a reason to reject without review. But that's often in the eye of the beholder. So it's a judgment call. Another reason for rejecting without review is similar findings have been published in whole or in part elsewhere by the same or different authors. There are exceptions to this. Sometimes your findings are important to verify important findings of somebody else that other people may have found questionable. Okay, we found the same thing. It's an important question and we're getting the same results. That makes it perhaps a very useful paper. So it's a judgment call also, but a Me Too paper is generally not looked at very well. Next. Papers of limited geographic importance or interest, paper that looks at a particular topic in the country of Belgium and doesn't consider the rest of Europe or the region that you could look at the same topic might make it of little interest, except to people in Belgium. Papers outside the scope of the journal, that's obvious, but that can be debatable too sometimes. A paper on products of uncertain chemical composition. We got a lot of papers that fit that description in pest management science. People grind it, what I call grind and squirt papers, where they grind up something and squirt it on a pest, and lo and behold, it kills it, but they don't know what the chemicals are and what they they ground up. A lot of papers like that. Those got rejected right off without any further consideration. Next. Preliminary papers. Papers with incomplete data, but that doesn't mean you can't answer a question with a small amount of data and do it well in a short paper. That can be done. Very eloquently designed experiments that give unequivocal data and answer the question, fine. That's acceptable. And I've seen very long papers that still don't answer the question, and to me are preliminary. And this is not as much a problem these days as in the past, but papers with really awful grammar. If the research looks good, we simply ask the authors to improve the grammar and resubmit if the research looks good. Next. Papers that are very similar to others or the same by different authors. We've seen papers where an author looks at the effect of a particular pesticide on a particular pest, and then a year later, the same experiment with another pesticide on the same pest, and on and on. That gets a little redundant, and exceptions can be made if the authors really hit on something big for a change. And no adequate or statistical analysis of the data. We have an absolute requirement that experiments be adequately replicated and statistically analyzed. Next. And of course, ethical issues can cause rejection without review, such as significant amounts of the verbiage taken from other publications. And luckily we have software now that will spot this, but you really need to look at the software reports to interpret this. Sometimes the people that have done the analysis have included the references, and of course that's going to look like plagiarism because those have been cited before. So look at the report very carefully before you accuse somebody of plagiarism. And we actually never accuse anybody of plagiarism. We just say there's a bit of redundancy here, too much for us to consider it. Next. Several trends in scientific publications. Open access is more than the trend, it's the way everything is going. And of course, that's all electronic. Faster online viewing after acceptance, unless you're publishing in a book. Rejection without review. Excuse me. Double-blind reviews where neither the authors nor the reviewers know who each other are. And then there's the opposite of that, where the reviews are open to the public also, along with the paper. And more efficient detection of unethical conduct such as plagiarism, false recommended reviewers, figure manipulation, inappropriate use of AI. The Council of Publication Ethics in the UK has a website that covers all of this and the latest ways of detecting these things. Next. Here's an example of some of the software to detect figure manipulation. Next. And there are other ethics issues like simultaneous submission. Our journal bans people from submitting future papers to us if they get caught simultaneously submitting to another journal. That's stealing people's time when you do that. A very unethical thing to do. Conflicts of interest. There are a lot of gray zones there, but you shouldn't recommend that people review your paper that are your best friends and colleagues. Inappropriate authorship. I could go on for an hour about that, but all the people that are authors should have had a significant contribution to the paper, more than just finding the money to do the research. Inappropriate self-citation. This is something that some publishers are keen on, because Clarivate is looking at this now too. If journals are using if there's a lot of self-citation, the journal's considered dicey. And you'll get the paper back sometimes from a journal saying you've cited 20% of the papers you've cited have authors that are on this paper. Take another look. Are these really all needed? They suspect that you're trying to inflate your H-index by citing your own papers. Including questionable data. Only you know whether or not you're doing that very often. And not retracting a paper when it's found to be fatally flawed. There's a website called Retraction Watch that covers all the retracted papers, and there are tens of thousands of retracted papers out there for all kinds of reasons. And if you have a paper that's fatally flawed and you know it, you really need to retract the paper so that people won't be citing it as a fact when you know it's not a fact. And there are many others. You could go on for hours about ethics issues. Next. This was covered earlier by Nageen, so I won't cover it. SCI has quite a few publications. I will mention next that one of the newer publications is a spin-off from Journal of Science and of Food and Agriculture. And what they've done is what the American Chemical Society is doing with some of its journals. They're rejecting a certain number of papers, not because they're fatally flawed from a scientific standpoint, but they're either Me Too papers or not of great interest, etc., low impact papers, but they're competently done, and they're recommending the authors consider they be published in this spin-off journal from that journal. Journal of Agriculture and Food Chemistry of the American Chemical Society has 2 spin-off journals that they send such papers to. But in order for this to work, you have to have a large number of submissions to the journal. And for SCI, this Journal of Science of Food and Agriculture gets by far the largest number of submissions. And that way, those competently done papers that are not of such great impact can be published by SCI, but in this spin-off journal. Next. And then Nageen mentioned the new journal, Sustainability, which was launched in the last month. Next. So thanks for listening. Next. And any questions or comments?
Thank you, Steve. I was thinking perhaps maybe we can have Joseph speak first, and then we can open up the floor to questions. So just to introduce Joseph, so Joseph Oddy is a data scientist working at Catapult, and is also an advisory board member for SCI Journal of the Science of Food and Agriculture reports.
Great, thank you very much. I'll just share the slide that I've got. Yeah, so thanks very much for having me. I was asked to share my experience as a sort of early career researcher, how I found the experiences of publishing and the small amount of reviewing that I've done in my career so far. So yeah, so at the moment I'm a data scientist working for a biotech company called Cell and Gene Therapy Catapult, and that's after completing my PhD, which was more in plant genetics. But I've been involved with SCI since my PhD, first as a member of their committees, and then subsequently as an SCI scholar, and I've been involved in their College of Scholars and a number of their events, which I've very much enjoyed, so definitely get involved if you can. So more recently, I joined the editorial advisory board for the journal that Stephen just mentioned, actually, GSFA Reports. And yeah, I've been on both sides of the sort of authoring and the reviewing now, I just wanted to give my perspective on both of those. So in terms of the authoring, I guess my experience has been largely good, I would say. So after you've submitted your paper, after lots of rounds of revisions with your co-authors, one of the best pieces of advice I got from my PhD supervisor was to take 24 hours once you receive your reviews back before really starting to get into them, because sometimes the reviews you get back, they give you very good feedback, but some of it can be very critical, and obviously if this is a paper you worked very hard on, you can take it a little bit to heart. So it's important to step back, realize that these people are doing it out of the benefit of for the benefit of science as a whole, and then go through sort of more objectively and try to keep your subjective emotions out of it. And in terms of getting involved with publishing and reviewing, I would say you really just have to take active role yourself. So reach out to people. For example, if you're interested in writing more papers, ask your manager or your supervisors how you can go about with this. Often they might be sitting on editorial boards themselves, or they might be reviewing a paper. And nowadays there's options in a lot of papers for people to do co-reviews. So in a job 2 years ago, I was co-reviewing a paper with my manager back then. And that leads me on to another bit of advice that I was given. We were both reviewing this paper, but it was a very mathematical biology paper, and we were both more plant biologists. And after having spent a week or two trying to review it, we both thought, actually, you know what? We have to tell them that we're not sure that we are the appropriate people to review this because we don't have that expertise. So I think it's important to admit sometimes, if you and your team don't have the necessary expertise, you should, tell the editor as such, and help them to find or point them in the right direction of different reviewers. In terms of seeking opportunities, one thing I found really useful was looking online at the websites of different journals to see what they offer. So, for example, I took some associate editor training with the organization CABI. I found that really useful. They went through a lot of publication ethics training, what to look out for when you're reviewing a paper, and all sorts of really useful information, which ran over a few weeks. So if you can find a program like that, I would really recommend it. And of course, reach out to journals that you are interested in. So if you think you have the expertise and you think you have the time to spare, then definitely reach out to the editors and express your interest in working with them. So if anyone has any other questions, I'm happy to answer them as well. And I can also send around this slide for the resources that I've listed. And I hope that's useful.
Thank you, Joseph. So now we'll just open the floor to any questions that anyone may have. Just going to open up the Q&A box. I can see we received one query from Beck Southwell. So how do you get asked to review papers? Working in industry, I find I don't really get asked, even though I've published work myself. So typically I'll ask the question, maybe Steve can have some other input into this. But from a publisher's perspective, usually there's kind of peer review systems which have databases that are linked to Web of Science, which are mainly academic databases. So that means that editors then get to select from those databases who can review papers. Also, sometimes editors can reach out to people within their network. So if you know of any active researchers, any active academics, you might want to get in contact with them and just suggest that you'd be interested in reviewing papers, and perhaps they can consider you if they see a relevant paper. Another thing which might be worth doing is, if there's any journals that you're interested in reviewing for, maybe contacting either the journal development editor or the publisher and just saying, hey, I would like to be a reviewer for this journal. And if you contact me, if you're interested in any of our journals, for example, I can certainly add you to the database and recommend you to the editorial boards as a potential reviewer. Steve, do you have anything further to add to that?
All true. Yeah, we get a lot of inquiries from young scientists asking that they be considered to be a reviewer. And your comment about asking maybe more established scientists, if you get asked to review a paper and you can't do it, would you recommend me? Quite a significant number of the reviewers I use were people that were suggested by the first person I asked to review the paper. So that's another way to get into the reviewing. If you do a really good job, you're going to be asked to review more papers too.
Yeah, but I think it's definitely useful to have more people from industry reviewing those papers. Mainly, I find it's mostly academics that are willing to review that content. But I think especially for SCI journals, we definitely need more industry insight and industry perspectives. So if anyone from industry is interested in reviewing, we we welcome that. So please do get in touch.
One thing that Joseph said that I liked was when you're asked to review a paper that you don't feel qualified for, let them know right away that you don't feel qualified. There's one quick caveat. Sometimes you go to papers that you're asked to review, and there's one important part of it that you are qualified to review, but the rest of it you're not. And I very often go ahead and review that part and tell the editor, I'm totally unqualified to judge this part of it, but this important part, here's my view on that. You need to get somebody else to give their opinion on the rest of the paper.
Yeah, absolutely. Joseph.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I just wondered if I could ask a question to Stephen as well, actually. One thing I've noticed when reviewing or publishing is I think data availability is getting much more of a bigger issue now. I was wondering what's your opinion on making it or mandatory to publish data or encouraging it?
Yeah, different journals have different standards for that. Yeah, the original data should be available to anybody that asks for it if you publish the paper. That's my view. And there are some companies that would like to publish on their findings, but they don't want to make all of the data available. So that makes it impossible to publish in some journals that are very strict about that. Yeah, it's yeah, the data that you've based your results on and your conclusions should be available to the public.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So I have another question. What strategies do you use to ensure your publications are widely read and cited? So happy to take the lead on that answer. I would say there's two parts to this. So there's sort of pre-publication. So upon submission, I think authors really need to take care of the title and making sure they've got the right keywords and the right words within the title so that it's optimized for search engines such as Google. I find sometimes the titles are very vague, it's not fully representing what the content is about. So just making sure you're paying attention to the title, paying attention to abstracts. Now a lot of researchers are using AI to sort of filter through the databases, and it's really even more key now. Just make sure you have the right keywords in your title and your abstract. Post-publication, I would say authors need to take a responsibility for author self-promotion. So just making sure that once your paper is published, you're disseminating that within your network, sending it out to all of your people that you work with, your colleagues, even social media. Social media is a powerful platform. So feel free to just post a link, especially if the paper is made open access. That open access meaning it's free to distribute and read and access widely. So just post that onto social media and share that with your network. We also do some promotion for authors. So we may get in contact with some of our published authors and involve them in certain marketing campaigns and social media campaigns as well. Steve, did you have anything to add to that?
Predicting the impact and the citability and all of a paper is impossible. I've had papers that I thought nobody would be interested in that got cited a lot, and I've had just the opposite occur. It's very difficult. I don't think I've ever cited the paper because I saw it on a website other than Google scholar or social media. Some people might, but yeah, it's very important that it be indexed properly in Google Scholar. People are turning more and more to that to find the pertinent literature, but they need to read the literature after they find it. Yeah, it's you want your paper to be read and cited as much as possible, preferably cited as much as possible, so that your H index is impacted by the paper, and that's difficult to predict. But having a good title that attracts people and writing a paper that makes a significant contribution to the area that you're publishing in is going to help a lot. And as I said numerous times, if you write a review, it's going to be cited more. If it's a review that's provocative, it might be cited even more than one that's not provocative.
And just to build on that as well, like I know it's been a while since I've been attending necessarily lots of certainly academic conferences, but you know, me personally, when I either attend online or in person presentations or talks or roundtables, and people then cite their own work, but other people's work, I often make a note then. That's when I do go and seek out a bit more, because they're given a flavor of their topic. And so in a presentation roundtable setting, and then a few people mentioned earlier, I think, you know, maybe Joseph, you mentioned it, see, about networking. I mean, your colleagues and other people promoting and citing your work is also hugely powerful. So again, that's a, yeah.
That's very important to go to meetings and give oral presentations as often as possible. They have more impact than standing in front of a poster board. And as I said, it's very unpredictable. A question I've had that's hard to answer: is it more important to have a highly cited paper in a low impact factor journal than a poorly cited paper in a high impact journal? Think about that. And some organizations would say, oh, we want, if it's in Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, it doesn't matter whether people cite it or not. It's a great journal. But maybe to get something highly cited from a low impact journal, you really had to overcome a lot for people to cite that paper. So Gregor Mendel's publication got lost for 20 years. Low impact journal. That's before my time, even before my time.
Oh.
Thank you. I have another question here. What are some common pitfalls to avoid when writing scientific publications? So Steve, I think this might be more relevant to you.
Oh boy, there are a lot of them. Being too wordy, using a lot of hyperbole about the potential impact of what you've done. Those are two of the main faults that I find with some younger scientists. You really don't have to write, or using the first chapter of your PhD thesis as the introduction for your paper. Well, I did all that work. I'll put that, I'll put most of that in my introduction. Those first chapters are way too long, and you really want to cut it down to the real meat of the question you're trying to answer. And very often those introductory chapters of a thesis are introducing several chapters, each of which is going to be a publication, not just one publication. So, yeah, but really, we're all in the same boat, whether you're just starting or you've been around a while. You learn as you go. But I've seen established scientists that use too much hyperbole, etc. Also, so maybe I have sometimes.
Great. Thanks.
It's the eye of the beholder very often.
Very true. Okay. Got a question here. What are the most common reasons for rejection, and how can authors avoid these pitfalls?
Depends on the journal quite a bit. As I mentioned, the most common reason for rejection of our journal was inadequate chemical definition of what they're working with. Very, very common problem. Other journals, very high impact journals, probably the most common reason for rejection is low impact. Who cares? So what? You know, it's a tiny increment in what's known on the topic, not substantial enough. So depends on the journal.
Great. And I have a
So
final
that's one reason when you know, it would be good for somebody with experience to look at what you've done and give you advice on what journal it might most likely be suited for. I've seen people that start with the highest impact journal and work their way down the food chain as it's rejected by, okay, I can't get it in a 10, I'll get it in an 8, and maybe a 6, and they work their way down. That's very time consuming and frustrating.
Thanks, Steve. And one final question. Could there be AI guidance about whether a paper will be useful before review?
AI guidance, I don't know. I'm not an expert on that. Publishers are grappling with how to handle AI, when it's acceptable, what authors have to divulge, in whether and how they used it, etc. So an issue, and I'm beginning to see papers that where the authors have not divulged they use AI, but I'm very, very certain they have, and sometimes it's astonishing. Very, very poorly done paper that's written really well, but the scholarship is awful because the AI doesn't know the topic. I had a review recently. I didn't accuse the authors of using AI. I just told them the scholarship was bad. It was a review paper, and I don't know how they programmed the AI, but it only considered papers published in the last 2 years. And the papers on this topic go back a couple of decades. So wasn't very useful. But it was, initially it was written really well until it started repeating itself. And I'm thinking, surely there's more than this, and there was. They left it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, no,
but I'm sure AI will be doing much better job on these things in the future. And there are probably AI written reviews out there that might be useful to people. But unless you have somebody that really knows the field to look at it and review it, it could end up things being published that are not exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, from a publisher's perspective, I mean, this is quite a fast moving situation with AI. We are receiving submissions that have specific pictures or images developed from AI or certain pieces of text. And we are working with our Wiley partners, our publishing partner Wiley, who are developing those tools to help us sort of identify AI content and develop some policies around that. So we should be able to keep this group posted on developments around that. Great. So I think we're up for time. It's 4:15. Thank you so much, everyone who joined, and thank you so much to all the speakers, Steve, Joseph, and Jackie, for joining. And hopefully this should be the first session of many, many more in the future. So thank you so much for your time, and hopefully speak soon. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.